Welcome to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Elizabeth. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, welcome back to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. So I'm sure everyone wants to take a breather from the nonstop spring we've had. Replants, spray application, side dress, and then it seems like we rolled right into wheat harvest and double crop plantings, which are looking pretty good actually, I think, with the rains that we've had in this area. But soybean diseases and insects are starting to pop up. SDS rearing its ugly head in Madison County already. And so we want to keep you on your toes and get you off to a good start monitoring these diseases. We've brought on Dr. Horacio Lopez Nicora. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about some disease updates and what to look for this season. So welcome, Horacio.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Horacio is our soybean pathologist, and you've probably seen him out at our extension events. He's been around for a little while. How many years now?
I started in August 2021.
Okay, yeah. Very energetic and excited about soybean diseases. So let's start with an overview of major soybean diseases in Ohio.
Yes, so very energetic about soybean diseases only because I want to make sure that we manage them very accurately and effectively here in Ohio. So this year we have been receiving samples in the lab with symptoms for Phytophthora. A lot of Phytophthora root and stem rot that we're seeing out there. Very early in the season, we started seeing a lot of the seedling diseases also caused by Phytophthora and Pythiums. These are the water molds. Very wet soils that were saturated. Those are excellent conditions for this disease to develop. These normally affect early stage development of soybean, either affecting their emergence, so we will see a reduction in stand, or post-emergence, once they come out, they can also be affected and died in the field, reducing plant population, and consequently, if it's very severe, yield reduction. Later on in the season, when we're hitting that reproductive stage, we can still see some of these plants affected by Phytophthora specifically. Again, in saturated soils, after those heavy rains that we have, we can see plants that are drying out. Normally, the branch remains in that 90 degrees, very typical symptoms of Phytophthora. We go and we look, and there's a reddish discoloration that seems to be coming up from the soil ground, soil level up to the first, second node. And that's very typical and diagnostic for Phytophthora. Normally, growers or agronomists that will send this to the lab, they will send the entire plant. They will put it in a plastic bag to keep the conditions of the field, avoid the plant to dry it out. So then when we receive it in the lab, we can actually try to pull the pathogen out and make an accurate diagnosis. But we have been seeing this season a lot. Now, we're hitting in the reproductive stage, like I mentioned, some things that in Ohio we may experience and we need to scout our field. One is Y mold. Y mold normally infects at flowering. So in areas where we do have experienced a lot of Y mold in the past, where the disease is very prevalent, that's where we normally recommend paying attention to the cultivars that we select, something with moderate resistance to Y mold if present. We should pick those up. We should probably alleviate a little bit our plant density in the field. So widening a little bit our rows will help. So in areas where we do maybe 7.5 go to 15, in extreme cases to 30, something that probably we won't recommend when we partner with our agronomist, soybean agronomist. That's something that we always want to balance. What's the cultural practice that we want to recommend that will keep you from losing yield, but at the same time protected against pathogens?
But there are a lot of farmers who struggle with white mold that go to the 30-inch rows.
Correct. Specifically, white mold very consistently hit the northeast part of the state. So, and then in those situations where we see it every year, we have to manage it. Fungicide application is warranted. But at R1, that's key. Normally, fungicide application, we think of R3, between R3 and R5. This fungus really infects at flowering, and it doesn't at any other growth stage through the spores that it's released. So the fungus that causes white mold will survive in the soil. It will produce these very hardened structures called sclerotia. They will germinate and produce spores that are released and blown by the wind and reach the plant and infect through the flowers. So that R1 and R2, when the flower is also senescing, that's the stage where the plant will be infected by these fungus, and that's where we need to protect the plant. So this is one of the few exceptions where our decision for a fungicide application does not go along with that scouting that we normally recommend. We normally, for other foliar pathogens that we're going to talk about, we normally recommend go and walk your fields and see if you have symptoms of this disease out there before you make a decision to spray. White mold, infection by the fungus that causes white mold takes place at flowering and we don't see it. And then when we do see the disease, it's too late. We walk those fields at around R3, R4, we see plants wilting. We open those canopy and we see the white fluffy mycelia with the black sclerotia on the stem, plants completely dead. It's too late. That's when we freak out. That's when we want to go and do an application to recover our crops. Those affected by white mold, those are lost plants in the field. So again, white mold, very specific and unique disease that pretty much we need to rely on history of that field, how prevalent the disease is, the conditions, environmental conditions that will or may lead to this disease. And this is a great time to introduce some of the amazing tools that we have been developing with research here from Ohio State, but also with collaborators across the North Central region. There is a website called the Crop Protection Network. It's a great resource for agronomists, for growers that want to learn more about diseases that affect soybean, but also other field crops like corn, wheat, alfalfa, and what kind of management we can implement in the field. So we have developed, with data from our different trials, we have developed this disease forecasting tool. So you can go to the Crop Protection Networks. There's a tab that says Tools, and there's a bunch of different tools that you can use. One of them is the disease forecasting tool. And you can choose the crop. In this case, we're going to focus on soybean. You can choose the disease you are interested in monitoring. One of them is white mold. And there's a map there where you can pin your farm, or you can add the actual GPS coordinate of your field, and it will retrieve the weather condition. It will retrieve that weather data and use a nice algorithm based on research that we have been conducting for years. And it will give us a potential risk situation for the development of this disease. It could be low, it could be moderate, or it could be high. Now, for white mold, this is a great tool because it gives us the three pieces of the disease triangle. If I know I have the disease, that's the first piece of the disease triangle. Like if I know the pathogen is in my field, and I know that I'm planting soybean that is a susceptible host, that's the second piece of the disease triangle. And now this tool is telling me that the environmental conditions are suitable for the disease to develop. That's the third and last piece of the disease triangle. Then I can make a decision of going and making an application at R1. So great tool. There's another one for frog eye leaf spot that we also recommend using. And again, this is built based on data we have been generating from our different trials, multiple years, multiple states, and data-driven tool that can be used for decision.
So you mentioned frog eye leaf spot. So can you give us a little bit of update on that? Because that's something that maybe, I don't know, a few years ago we didn't worry about too much, but has been increasing.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we covered Y-mold just now, and now transition to the other foliar pathogens. So when we think about foliar pathogens, there are three that comes to our mind when we are in Ohio and in this part of the north central region, right? Septoria brown spot, it's pretty common and very easy to spot. Lower leaves are very yellow with brown spots that we can see very easily. If the crop is susceptible, the cultivar is susceptible, we can see those yellowing plants, you know, migrating upwards. That's how the pathogen spread. It will produce spores that, with splashing water, it will splash to the above leaves that are greener and healthy, and then to neighboring plants, right? Very common to see. Most of our cultivars have good resistance against Septoria brown spot, so it's a matter of just keeping an eye open to see if those yellowing leaves are not, migrating upwards in terms of spreading.
Yeah, very common, but not very severe, right? You can usually see it every year on those first leaves,
Yes.
but it doesn't typically cause yield reduction.
Yes, you are right there. If those, if those symptoms remain on the lower leaves or on the lower canopy area, I will say that that's good. The crop is doing a good work of keeping those on the lower canopy area, and that's great. When we're seeing migrating upwards to the mid or upper canopy area, that's where we may be concerned. Maybe we're dealing with a very susceptible cultivar, but that's where we need to pay attention. But you're right in that sense. The other one is Cercospora leaf blight, comes a little bit later, gives like a very purple tan or blight to the leaf. Very common to see. Sometimes can be misdiagnosed with nutrient deficiency. It makes the leaf look more leathery in aspect, right? Also can cause seed stain, purple seed stain. So sometimes we will harvest those fields and we will see that the seeds are purple. That's something, or a disease, that we don't have enough data to really make an assessment if we are seeing yield reduction. It doesn't show up very often, but we're seeing more than before. So something that we are paying attention in our fungicide trials, we go and we rate diseases. That's something that is now included, that we purposely go and look for and rate for. So it's something that we are keeping a record of, just in case we're seeing more and more every year. And then the third one you mentioned is frog eye leaf spot, also caused by a fungus called Cercospora sohina. And it's one that causes lesions that are elliptic. It resembles the eye of a frog. That's why frog eye leaf spot. But inside that lesion, so the lesion itself is very dark, in like a brown, purplish color, with a more clear center of that lesion, and that's where we actually can see the fungus being produced. So the spores are produced in that lesion. It looks like whiskers, very fuzzy. We can actually see that with the help of a hand lens, or sometimes even with our naked eye. That's very important because unfortunately there are other things that can cause the same symptomology. So some herbicide application will cause the same type of symptom, frog eye leaf spot, but there's the absence of the pathogen, right? It's not a disease. So that's where looking at these symptomologies are very important, trying to find the actual culprit, in this case the fungus that is producing that fuzzy growing sporulation. Now, This is a disease that causes significant yield reduction to soybean, and specifically if it hits soybean between that R3 and R5 growth stage. So beginning of pod and um, full pod and growing of the seed, that's where this disease will significantly reduce yield. And that's where we want to protect our soybean. Resistance is a great way to protect our soybeans against these foliar pathogens. So when we are making a selection of our soybean cultivars, looking at the seed catalog, make sure that you choose something that has resistance to frog eye leaf spot when you're picking your cultivar, specifically if you have been experiencing this disease in past years. Fungicide application, it's also beneficial when you have a high disease pressure. So when you whack those fields at R2, R3, and you start seeing the presence of this disease, when you start seeing mid canopy the development of these symptoms, that's where we want to pull the trigger and make a fungicide application. The fungus in the population of these fungus has experienced in the north central region shift in resistance to fungicide. So recurrent application of same active ingredients can create this selection pressure in the population. So we have, a population of the frog eye leaf spot pathogen that recurrently is exposed to the same active ingredient, and some individuals of these populations can develop resistance to this product. And then all of a sudden we have those that develop resistance now developing more than the ones that are still sensitive to fungicide. This is called fungicide resistance, right? And this is something that we want to avoid at all cost, because we know that frog eye leaf spot pathogen populations, there are some that have developed resistance to some fungicide active ingredients, such as like the QOI, right? The strawberry lurins. So in order to avoid this type of resistance, what we normally recommend is to use products with multiple active ingredients or multiple mode of actions. Sometimes we can find that also as the frag numbers. The frag numbers, if we look for each of the active ingredients and each has a different frag numbers, that's great, because that will help us mitigate and reduce the development of resistance to fungicide by the pathogen population.
Do you know, or is your lab, or are there labs that are testing and monitoring resistance? Like if someone thinks they have a disease population that's resistant?
Yes, so that's something that definitely we can help with. It will be a specific test for a specific request. So it will come from what you just mentioned, a grower that is concerned that I have been dealing with frog eye, I have been using these particular active ingredients, and I don't see any reduction in severity in the disease. We definitely will have to isolate the pathogen, so we will need those leaves with symptoms and the fungus. We will need to pull the fungus and grow them in pure culture. And then we have molecular tools. We have molecular tools that we can use. So a very quick diagnosis will be looking for that specific mutation on the fungus. So originally, like we were mentioning, we have a population that is very sensitive to the fungicide, that we can very effectively use the fungicide to reduce the growth and the development of the disease and the pathogen, right? But then overexposure to the same active ingredients generate these mutations. And we have specific primers that can help us identify if the population from a specific field have that mutations that confer resistance to this product. So definitely something that we can work with. In many cases, the samples we receive are confirmation. Is this frog eye leaf spot that I'm looking? That's pretty straightforward. An additional request, I need to know if it is sensitive to certain fungicide, then we can definitely assist with that as well.
I think with one of the best tools we've got for combating that resistance is what you talked about, making sure that we're only making applications when we've got all of those components of the disease triangle and we have a risk. So looking at 2026 right now, what are your top concerns for growers in the field that they should be looking for when they're scouting fields?
Yes, that's a great question and a great comment, right? So for foliar pathogens specifically, and ones that we have been normally and commonly just waiting for that R3 to make our fungicide application, and I'm gonna make my fungicide application because why not? It's insurance. That's where we want to try and show that data that we have collected for several years in multiple locations from Ohio to maybe encourage growers to skip that application, because you don't have those components that will develop the disease, or because you don't even have the disease out there.
It's not just the resistance tool, it's also economic.
100%. So as an example, for 3 years with Dr. Laura Lindsay, our soybean agronomist, and our grad students, for 3 years we conducted a study throughout Ohio. So 2 commercial fields in the northern part of Ohio, 2 in the central part of Ohio, and 2 in the southern part of Ohio. So 6 commercial fields in Ohio, trying to capture the whole spatial and geographic variability of our state for 3 years. So 6 times 3, we have 18 year sites that we have conducted these experiments, and we have applied at different times fungicides for these foliar diseases. So we applied at a V5. Well, V5 is too early, right? Well, we had conversations with growers that were asking, well, when I go and apply my herbicide at V5, can I piggyback and put a fungicide and just do it? That's a great question. We need data to answer that question, and that's why we included V5. R3 is a very common one, and then R5. And we also have V5 followed by R3 and V5 followed by R5. So we have a large set of timing of applications, products with multiple active ingredients, and then products with only one active ingredient. Long story short, we did not detect any significant effect on any of these applications on yield, which compared to the check, right? We also have a check that doesn't receive any applications. Putting all together in the analysis, we did not see any significant increase in yield due to these fungicide applications. The one thing is that for these 3 years, we did not see significant disease pressure either. So we were making applications in fields that look extremely healthy. Here and there in some fields, we had 18 fields overall, right, in 3 years. 1 or 2, maybe 3 fields we did see frog eye leaf spot showing. One field I remember that was very significant that I recall was a northwest field where we had frog eye leaf spot, which is for us very interesting, because normally frog eye leaf spot remains in that central southern part of the state. So now we're seeing that this pathogen can overwinter in northern areas where before we didn't have to even worry about. So that's something that we should pay attention, and we are paying attention. But then the amount of disease that we were recording, and we do this through severity, was very minimal. Yes, the application further reduced the severity, but it was so low that it was not even enough to cause yield reduction. And therefore, we did not see that significant yield increase due to fungicide application. We couple that, Elizabeth, like you mentioned, with an economic analysis, an ROI study. So how much we were recovering after making this application. And unfortunately, in many cases with soybean price, we were not. So something to keep in mind. And, we have resistance that can be developed by the pathogen population, economics that plays an important role, and just the decision of applying a product that is meant to reduce disease when disease is not out there.
Yeah, and when you think about the long term, if you're using these fungicides when you don't need them, not only are you spending money you don't need to, but you're that resistance piece is still potentially getting worse, and down the road we may have to have more expensive solutions if these diseases do come up and have pressure, but we've lost our inexpensive tools.
100%. And let's be honest, because we have worked with growers, or we are growers ourselves, right? When we are putting something as an insurance, quote unquote, we're going to choose something that is not extremely expensive. We're going to choose something that probably has one active ingredient. We're going to go with something that it's about to expire there in the head house, right? We're going to do it because, we want to cover our backs. And in many cases, like you're mentioning, Amanda, this could play against us, right? This could be the factor that recurrently will start selecting the population in our field to become very resistant to these products, and to the point that they will not be helpful when we need them actually to help us.
Well, and a shameless plug, if you are making a fungicide application or considering it, it's a great opportunity to leave some check strips to check and see what the impact is in your field and whether it was worth it. So you can always reach out to us or your local extension agent, and we'd be happy to help set up a trial so we can collect more data to find environments or understand those thresholds in individual fields.
A great opportunity to highlight what e-fields is doing, right? So again, reaching out to your extension educator or any of us, we will be more than happy to set some trials with you. Very easy. It's a matter of making sure that some of the strips do not receive the product that you're using. So just turning off the nozzles, that will work perfectly well. Skipping some passes, that will be great. We need reps, right? We need multiple of those checks so then we can run proper statistics. But for me, thinking as a grower, generating data from my own field with the products that I'm using, how awesome is that, right?
Yeah, and I think it's so important because you talk about your trial where we didn't see a significant yield response. We've done a lot of fungicide trials with e-fields over the years, and sometimes there's a response and sometimes there's not. And right now we really don't have enough data to understand why. Sometimes we see a response when the disease pressure was relatively low. Sometimes we don't see a response when the disease pressure was really high. And so I think there's a lot of mysteries there that we need more data to help solve.
100%. And we're gonna always experience that, right? In when we're talking here, we're talking on the average. When I'm talking about these 18 sites years, we're talking about on average. When we put everything together and we run the proper analysis, we don't see a significant bump. Yeah, yield 1 in 2022 did experience a significant bump. How much? Very little, but significant, that was detectable, right? But it was 1 in 18 fields, right? And again, how did that happen? Why? Those are questions that we always try to better understand. Yeah.
All right, so that wraps up our discussion on our foliar diseases. Horacio, you've given us some great points. We'll link up some resources. We do want to continue discussion with you on SDS and Red Crown. We'll give a teaser there. So listeners, stay tuned to our next podcast where we continue our discussion on soybean diseases. So again, Horacio, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, encourage everyone to visit that Crop Protection Network website. A lot of tools there, resources, data from our fungicide efficacy trials. They're dumped together with all the other data from the North Central region to generate a fact sheet for best active ingredients and how effective they work against different foliar diseases. Check that out. That can guide you on selecting products if you are planning to apply a fungicide. And again, scout your fields. Check if you have foliar diseases before you make a decision.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next episode.